So welcome to Lesson 8. The title is Basic Elements in the Body of Your HTML Document, Part 4. So in this lesson I'm going to walk you through the process step by step of using properly formatted elements in the body of your HTML document, more specifically how to code an accessible form that is also structurally valid HTML and fully web accessible. This is going to be a very simple form. I'm not going to go into all the various types of form fields in this particular video. That's for a later course, but to give you the basics of how to do a form data collection on the web and to do so accessibly and validly, you'll start off by coding it properly. And we're not going to be worrying about, just for the caveat to this, we're not going to be worrying in this particular instruction about connecting your form to a working script so that your data in your form is processed and sent somewhere. Right? That's also for a later course, but we're going to show you just how to code the form fields correctly and the button as well. So first we'll just look at the form tag itself. The form tag requires a closing tag and an attribute. In order for the form tag to be valid HTML, it must have an action attribute with a value of a script that it's pointing to process the data from your form fields. And the various scripts and types of form processors that you can use are many. So again, I'm not going to go into that, but your form tag must have an action attribute and it must have a value in order to be valid HTML. It requires a closing tag. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add an input tag to provide the site visitor with a field into which to put the information that you're requesting. In this case, we're asking for name, right? So whenever you have an input field on your form, your input field must have an ID attribute that's with a value. So in this case, the ID of our input field is name. So in order for this to be an accessible form field, we must also have a label tag, which is for the attribute for that ID that you've specified. So we specified an ID attribute with a value of name, so we need a label with a for attribute and a value of name. That ties this label with this input field. So and label tags have a closing tag. Input tags are self-closing. They do not require a tag. So these two things together are basically like one form field. We have the input field that we've ID'd as a name. It's a text field, which gives us this blank in which to input text. We have just a name attribute specific to this particular field. But the most important are these two, ID and type, for our input. And then we have a label with a for attribute that matches the ID attribute of the input. Here we've put some text so that it appears on the page, and a closing tag. So the benefit of having a label with a for attribute associated with the ID attribute, with these two matching, is from an accessibility perspective, as somebody moves through your page and they tab to just the name text, notice how clicking on the name text activated the field to the right, or clicking on the email field activated the field to the right. When I click on the text name, the label, for example, because of the association in the matching for and ID attributes, here it's name, here the for and ID attributes are email. Because the label and the input field have matching for and ID attributes, there's that accessibility association, which also makes the form more usable. So then people can just type their name here. And then click submit. The nice thing is they can also tab using the tab key, shift tab or tab, back and forth between your elements. It's important also when you're creating forms, you want to test them with your keyboard. So if you're in one and you hit tab, you should go to the next one. When you finish the form, tab should take you to submit, where you can then press enter to submit it. So yeah, we don't have a form processor.php. So There's nothing for it to process. So that's basically it for forms. So just kind of go back through it. The label is added to tie the purpose of the field and its value together. This aids in both accessibility and usability as it adds semantic meaning to the input field. The for attribute is provided for accessibility purposes. The value provided between the quotes will be matched with the value of the ID attribute for the associated input tag. Now the input tag, just a recap, is the actual form field into which a site visitor will type information. Notice how the ID attribute on this input tag matches the for attribute on the label tag. Those two matching items are required for accessibility purposes, as the input field now has a label and makes sense to a screen reader. For visually impaired site visitors, there are many values that can be used in the type attribute. In this case, we're just going to use the standard text type, which displays a basic form field into which text can be typed. The name attribute here at the end is going to be any value that you want. Now the input type submit down at the bottom to cover the button portion. The submit type is understood by all browsers and assistive technologies as a button. So the fact that you've indicated type equals submit will display it as a button. Assistive technologies will understand that semantic meaning as well. The value that you provide will be the value displayed as the text on the button. So probably better visually to make that a capital. That looks a little bit better. You could even say, hey, well, I want my value to be so whatever you put in between the quotes is going to be the value that shows up in your button. So I encourage you to take this information to practice with different form fields, labels and inputs, to practice how that looks. Now I've added, you'll notice here I've added these BR tags. BR space / in between brackets is just a line break. So I've added these line breaks to create the visual space so that it looks more visually aesthetically pleasing. If you don't have those, then it doesn't look that great. It's just a single line, but that could also be useful if you were wanting to do that. Normally you would style your form with cascading style sheets with CSS, but we're not covering CSS in this course. But a line break moves content down and actually makes it look a little bit more visually appealing or aesthetically pleasing and easier to read as you scan the page. So recommend that you test these various things, you try them out, and we look forward to seeing you in lesson 9.